Well, that's about as good as humanity gets. And so it's such a neat time to be celebrating with the great Twyman family, Michelle and Julie and Lisa and Jay. Thank you for sharing this with us this evening and for letting us have this dinner in honor of your dad and Maurice. And so we're going to talk about Maurice and Jack. We're going to ask our esteemed panel to come to the chairs. Lisa, if you come on up. Lisa is the oldest of the Twyman kids. And Lisa is when we were younger, and Lisa was the older sibling. Always went out of her way to be nice to us, and then got the really cool job with Sports Illustrated. We're all really impressed with that. And Jay, if you would join as well. Jay got the honor of hitting the game-winning shot for Boston College against UC, so we're going to have to ask you how your dad reacted to that. Ken, if you come up. Ken, as you know, is former mayor of Cincinnati, former treasurer of the state of Ohio, former secretary of the state of Ohio, very good friends with Jack and Maurice, so we'll be very interested in your perspectives. And my brother John, if you come on up. John, I think is the longest running CEO of a Fortune 500 company in the country. And you'll remember the tennis tournament last August 1st was gone. The tennis tournament was going to Charlotte, and there was no getting it back. And September 1st got renewed for 25 years. One of the biggest fourth quarter comeback 19 rallies in the history of our city, huge. But Jay and I have been in school since we were in fourth grade together, and Mr. Twyman was always unique. One of those people that took an interest in everybody, every single kid coming off the court, off the field, out of the classroom, just took a genuine interest in types of things you don't remember, because adults can treat kids any way they want to, and your dad was really special. Cal, you remember that? Yeah. And Matt. When we were in seventh grade at Summit, there was a Fathers Against Faculty basketball game, and the fathers had Jack, Phil Wheeler played at UC, and the faculty had some young guys, Dick Felger, Dan Laurie, that were playing on a regular basis, George Ecker, Bob Jenke, and the legendary Mr. Holmes. And Dick Holmes was 6'5", 250, had been all-city in football, basketball, and baseball at Elder High School, played professional baseball, played basketball at UC. But he was in his mid-50s back in the days when guys in their 50s had not exercised in 20 years. But this game was a classic game. It came down to 75, 6 seconds left. Jack goes up for what's going to be the winning layup, gets called for traveling by the referee who was roommates with one of the teachers. And he was not happy at all. And then Mr. Holmes got fouled, made both free throws to win the game. And they had a rematch the following year, and Jack was not going to lose a second time. It did not come to a close call that game. But he was such a great example of the lessons learned from athletics and how to apply that, when to be cooperative, when to be competitive, and just such a great role model for all of us in so many ways. Lisa is the oldest. Can you tell us a little bit? Oldest of the siblings, I mean. Not the oldest person here, by any means. As far as early memories of the things that would be interesting about your dad, Maurice?
Yes, I am the oldest, and I'm totally intimidated by being up here with all these orators. I don't speak as well as they do, but yes, when and I was talking with Bill, and I think I was, 5 years old, and Jay. Well, first of all, we lived in Mount Airy. We had a duplex. There was somebody living up above us, and Jay and I shared a bedroom. He was in the crib because he was an infant, and I was the older sister. And but Dad was drafted in the second round of the NBA, and I think the most he ever made was $30,000. And I always asked him, does that make you crazy? I mean, what people are making today? And he goes, no, I was just so happy for the opportunity. And he took full advantage of that opportunity. And, that film is lovely, by the way. But Jay was mentioning that they weren't, Maurice and Dad weren't real good friends when they were playing because, Dad was like this madman. He had an insurance business, and he would tell me, he would go to work at the insurance company. He'd show up for practice in his suit, and people were like, oh my God, what are you doing? And then he found a gig, working for the local, TV station to do sports. In the meantime, his great partner, my mother, was so involved with Maurice and just, that it really was a dual objective that they had. And but he had two small kids, me and Jay was the big troublemaker. So, my poor mother. But anyway, he worked very hard, and I think he really was a great teammate. Maurice was a single man. He was very attractive. I think he was a great dresser, and I think he really loved, his being part of the NBA, and that was a great part of his life at that. But, they were just on two separate paths at the time. So anyway.
Neat. Thank you. And Jay, you and your dad had some legendary one-on-one games in the backyard, and can you tell us more about those and maybe about how those games ended?
Well, first of all, thank you, Bill, for tonight. I feel like we're honoring my dad for his generosity, but boy, I'm just thinking about the task that Bill does every year with this organization and the gift he does and gives to the city of Cincinnati. I mean, this man is a saint. So all this little part that we're doing is just helping, him achieve some great things for the city and for this area. But so yeah, I mean, I was, as Lisa said, I wasn't the best kid in the world, but Chip can attest to that wherever he is. But yeah, I mean, he was obviously an NBA player when I was very young. He sat down with me, probably when I was like 9 or 10, and he said, "Jay, do you want to be a professional basketball player? Because if you do, I know what it takes, and I'll bring you on that journey." Little did I know, if I said yes, my life would be tortured from that point on. So I said yes, of course. So, it was good. I had a decent career. I think, I probably got the most out of my limited physical abilities. But during high school, I started to grow a little bit. But Dad would always want to prove who was the person in charge and was the person that could control the court. So it was like every Friday after work, he'd be preparing, come home from work, and he's like, "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock? Yep, we'll play out in our court." We had a little tennis court with a little side basketball court, so 9 o'clock we go out there. And he had his way with me freshman year. It was brutal. Sophomore year, and he just loved it. The rest of the weekend was so great. Mom was happy, Dad was happy, everybody was happy except Jay, but that's okay. Junior year, I started getting a little bit bigger and stronger, and then I started to beat him. And the weekends became a little bit more quiet. And then, come out, all of a sudden I'd had a little bloody lip, coming off the court. And then it got pretty brutal. And then finally, after about a couple months of me starting to own him and him just pouting all weekend, he goes to work on a Monday, I go to school on a Monday, Mom gets on the phone on a Monday. Next thing we know, we come home from work and school, and the basketball court has been dug up. It's been taken away. He goes, "You guys are not doing this anymore. We need family peace." So that's the way it ended. My mom was the hero there. And then he started to own me in golf for the rest of my life, so he had his way with me.
That's great. And Ken, you knew Jack well, you knew Maurice. Memories?
Well, I knew both through Oscar Robertson and Wayne Emery. Let me just give you a backstory. My grandmother's second husband was a fellow by the name of Miller Rice, and he played in the old Negro Baseball League. He actually played for my uncle, D. Hart Hubbard, who was one of the founders of the American Negro Baseball League, and 100 years ago was the first black to win an Olympic gold medal in track and field in the Paris Games. But the way I got to know Jack was through Oscar and Wayne and my grandfather. My grandfather was a banker, not registered, but
perfect.
He would lend money, and he made enough profit to get 2 seats on the front row behind the scores table at the Royals basketball games. And my grandmother became famous through Al Shadakati because she had a cowbell. And every time Jack and Oscar would score, she would ring that cowbell. So Wayne and Terry and Oscar and Yvonne just told me, and somebody else, Father E.J. O'Connor, that Jack Twyman was the epitome of what those of us who had Jesuit educations and at Xavier at the time was all male school, that Jack was truly a man who lived his life for others. That he, in fact, set a standard through his moral example. And again, these were competitive guys, Oscar and Wayne and Jack and Maurice, but that shined through. And through my grandmother, my grandfather, Oscar and Vaughn, I got to see Jack and understand the sacrifice, the example that he had made, just by how he lived his life and how he cared for Mo. And that was very, very, very powerful. And my uncle died 6 years after Mo died in 70. But the person that he understood to be the shining example, again, just a little backstory. He had been scheduled to compete against Eric Little in the 1924 games in the 100, but when he got to Paris, he was told that the 100 was a white-only event. So he didn't get to compete, but he said God had blessed him because he had shown him, and Eric didn't compete because the finals fell on the Sabbath, and his religion didn't allow him to. He, in fact, said, my uncle said that his power of the moral example and fidelity to faith was a life lesson that was more valuable than the gold medal. He also said, and Oscar and Wayne underscored this, that Jack's fidelity to his faith and to others was a powerful example and greater than any salary, any award that anybody could give. That's the lesson I learned from Jack Twyman.
Thank you, Ken. John, you knew Jack very, very well and worked with him closely on your board in business, and the lessons he took from the playing court to the rest of the world, to his business and such. The memories of Jack?
Well, I got to know Jack later. I didn't come back to Cincinnati until 1987, and I probably met him in the mid-'90s. He was very close friends with some good guys that I knew pretty well, who were older, Roger Howe, Neil Armstrong, Dick Farmer. And Jack was like their foursome. Those guys did a lot together. And so I got pulled into a lot of different things with those guys. And they were all hugely great guys. Well, one day I was talking to Jack. He was telling me about his insurance experience and how important it was to treat the salespeople right and whatnot. I had no idea he had been in the insurance business because he'd been a large food broker, what I knew about him. So we talked a little bit about that. And I finally said, Jack, I think you would like to go on our board, wouldn't you? He goes, nah, I'm done. I'm done, John. I haven't bought a new tie in 2 years. I'm not buying more suits. I said, well, give it a try. Well, he loved it. He threw himself into it whole hog. He got to know our sales folks. He got to know our management team really well. I mean, he was a really involved director in a very positive way. And from time to time, he'd get on a plane with me and we'd go visit an office or a meeting. And he would get all riled up and, get very excited by it. But he was a great director. He knew the business. He cared. He was smart and did a lot of stuff. And he also had a great sense of humor. I remember one time, one of our directors came into a board meeting about 20 seconds late. And I don't want to out this guy because I wouldn't want to. But the first thing he says is, the guy has on a very bright pink shirt with a suit. So, I'm not going to out this guy. So he says, hey, Willie, do you realize there's only two kind of guys that can wear shirts like that? And you're no bullfighter. So the nameless director was shocked, and the room lost it. But that was Jack. He loved to needle people. He was fun, smart, witty, and great. And I can remember when he was not doing well, I'd call him up, toward the end there, and he would sound like he's ready to go out and start for an NBA game. And then later, Carol said to me, he gets up, and as soon as he hangs up, he goes down. and he's exhausted, but he would get himself up for that. But Jack was one of those guys you could always count on. He was the ideal director. He knew the business, but he also knew what your role is on the board. It's not to run the company. It's to be a confidant to the CEO and to understand what's going on and help the management team figure out different courses of action. So he was one of those guys who was just irreplaceable. I remember when he asked me to do the eulogy at his funeral, being the young guy, I came in last. First, Dick Farmer read a prayer because he said it's too difficult to do this, and he was fine. Then Neil Armstrong came in and just killed it. So I followed Neil, and I said, now I know what Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins felt like. And Neil was a special guy. He and Jack were very, very close. Jack took Neil one time over to play golf in Scotland. It was Bobby Knight, Jack, Neil, and maybe Roger House. That sound right?
Sounds right.
So one of the guys on our board was George Herbert Walker, as in the Walker Cup, as in George Bush's Sr.'s first cousin. A great guy. So he arranges for them to play, I think it was either St. Andrews or Royal and Ancient. So those guys go over and they play, and they get this huge turnout. Guys are all over him and whatnot. Jack, hey, these guys might know who I am and all that stuff. Well, he was playing with the first guy that ever walked on the moon, but it didn't occur to him. And so they get their bill at the end of the day, and it's like $7.50 for lunch, for the golf, everything. And Jack, he said, God, it was great. That Neil did all this. I said, Jack, Bert picked it up. He goes, oh, I should have thought of that. Jack, very quiet. But he was great. And at the end of the day, there's still a hole at Western and Southern from Jack's leaving us. Only one in a million. Only one in a million.
Thank you.
I'll tell you, to build upon what you said, John, about him jumping into things, and I mean, he was on sort of my little board, I would say. whenever I had an outing, he would say, Jay, I'm your assistant, what do you want me to do? And I'd have go up to Double Eagle, I'd bring 8 clients, and I'd bring a research guy, and Dad would come, right? But this was really a boondoggle. We were there to play golf. But the way you could sort of justify it is that you'd start the meeting, breakfast meeting. Everybody met at like 7 o'clock. You'd have breakfast. You'd have your economist give a talk, and then you'd get out and play golf. And it was, you could check off all the boxes. So it's 7 o'clock. We're all meeting. The economist starts speaking around 7:30. Dad is there at 7, and then he's got the front row seat at 7:30 in the breakfast place. He's got a pen and a piece of paper, and he's taking notes. Everybody's like, who's that? I go, that's my dad, but just, he'll be fine. And then the economist is speaking. He's writing, notes while the economist is going. Talks about the Ginnie Mae market. He talks about this. And it's around 8 o'clock. We have about an 8:20, 8:30 tea time. 8 o'clock, wraps up. I'm like, okay, everybody, and Dad raises his hand. He goes, no, could you explain to me how the Ginnie Mae market works and why are the rates so much lower? And they're looking at me, and so he answered, and then it was just like, that's Dad. He just, everything he did, he just wanted to really do it 100%. And it's just like what you said, it was just fantastic. That was exactly Dad. He jumped in it. When he did it 100%.
And Lisa, your mom was so important with everything, obviously, and particularly the Maurice relationship. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Could I interject briefly? Because Dad loved being on the Western and Southern board. He loved it. And he told me a story where when, John, you called him, and he would always call you Barrett. And he was like, what? You want me to be on the board? Barrett, I'm at the age where you're trying to get people off the board. Why in the world would you want me on your board? But oh my gosh, he loved it. And when he had a board meeting, I mean, he was out the door, like Jay would say, 2 hours early, dressed to the nines, and board meeting. I'm like, God, you guys meet early. Well, I gotta get ready. And it was great. But my mom and my dad were just such a great team. And Mom told me that she was also the legal guardian. A judge came to both of them and said, this guy is in a world of hurt. There's nobody here because, as Dad would say, all the players, they would go home at the end of the season, and Dad was the only one that lived full time in Cincinnati at the time. It was before Oscar, right? And so anyway, my mom was very involved, and should I tell you my story about it? Okay. So because I was the oldest, I had these vague memories of being a child and, with Mom and Dad. And, I think Maurice had been ill for about 2 years. And before Dad and Mom set us down on our little table at Wyoming, and Dad he really wanted, Jay and I to know about Maurice. And so we sat down at the table, and, Dad said, I want you to come meet your brother. And I'm looking at Jay like, I know him. What do you, I mean, it was very confusing for someone who was like 5 years old. And so, Mom got us all dressed up, and Dad and I, we went to the hospital the first time to see Maurice. And I just remember, I was really scared the first time, and I have to imagine you were too. We're holding on to our mom's hands, and, there's the hospital door open, and we're just like, we were pretty obedient at the time. I think it went downhill from there. But anyway, so they walk us in, and we're kind of trepidatious about the whole thing. And I couldn't understand what he was saying, and I really, Dad could, but I never could. But anyway, it was his nurse who said, hop on the bed. And so Dad lifted me or you, or Mom lifted the other, and we just sat there. And I mean, the whole room was always just so bright, and it was all Maurice. I mean, he was happy to see us, and so as we got older, we would kind of sprint down they would take us to the hospital, and we'd sprint down and jump on the bed, and, we would bring these horrible crayon drawings. I give Jay grief. He probably spelled J like this, with the J pointing the...
It was backwards. I did it backwards.
I think it was. But anyway, Dad was always very intent that Maurice was a part of our family, and that was really important to him and my mother and to us.
And he was, just to build upon that, and he was just always up to, like what Dad said in the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and he would always create these pieces for us to remember him. And like I think he made a great piece for you. It was more an equestrian theme. For me, I still have it. It's on my desk. It was a paper mache box, and it was all these different sports people of the time. But right in the center of the top of the box is a picture of Maurice, and underneath was the caption, he's in a wheelchair, and underneath was the caption, leading the life. And he really thought that he was leading the life because he had all these people surrounding him, and he always wanted to be a source of inspiration. Can you believe that? Was somebody that was going through what he was going through. So the hero there is, the way Maurice handled this whole thing was just an amazing thing. In 12 years in the hospital, he never missed an election, to vote in an election. That's an amazing thing. Right. He's very well read. He loved music. He loved to talk books with my mom. Talk about a hero and somebody that just really overcame, an unsurmountable, amount of tragedy. He handled it with grace.
Yeah, he epitomized the attitude of never surrendering. And I sort of, the Barrett boys are like younger brothers because I was sort of brought up by Ray Baldwin, their father, and Doc Zenny. And I just remember Sako Wheathy telling me one time that the one thing that he remembered about Mo was the whole never surrender, and that the other thing that he remembered about your father was that he wouldn't hesitate to get in your grill if in fact he wanted to make a point. And so for me to see the camaraderie and the respect among that network of folks who were not only influential but doers again, it gave life to the whole motto of living a life for others and doing it through your personal example. And I would just tell you that it was that relationship that is the lesson for our generation and the next generation and the next generation, is that they, in fact, had a network of friends. I'll close on this point. Colin Powell, once we were in a conversation, and I told him that I grew up in the Laurel Homes, and I could get in trouble at this end of the project, and by the time I got home, my mother was standing in the door with a shoe. And Colin said, yeah, I had that experience. He said, the kids today have the internet. We had the auntie net. We had an aunt in every window. And it underscored the importance of human relationships and networks. And you all and the Twymans, the Barretts, the Robertsons, the Embrys, you all formed a network that was more powerful than any telecommunication system that we have today.
Well, I tell you,
And Ken, you mentioned Sacco Weethy. Sacco Weethy was Jack's coach at UC, and Sacco is the only person in both Xavier and UC's Athletic Hall of Fame. He played 3 sports at XU and coached 2 sports at UC, and it was all pro for Detroit Lions. Played professional basketball and baseball as well. And our brother Fran tells a story about when Sacco went to confession one time down at St. Xavier Church downtown, and decided to go to confession. There was no priest on the other side. And his friend Dan Tehan became sheriff later, snuck on the other side, pretended to be the priest, heard all Sacco's sins. You can only imagine Sacco's sins. Had a few minutes, Tehan contained himself, starts cracking up. Sacco recognized the laugh, chasing between the pews down the aisle and out the door.
I'll tell you another quick Sacco story. He recruited Jack to Cincinnati from Pittsburgh. He was a coach at UC. So when I was in high school, we'd go down to the Cincinnati club and play basketball. And Sacco Weethy would play in high-top gym shoes, an athletic supporter, and nothing else. And you didn't really want to guard him. But I remember I had a great opportunity to break for the basket. And I go, and I can't get anywhere because he was all-pro for the Pistons and the Lions.
Right.
I'd go to break. His hand is inside my trunks, and I can't go anywhere without him. I mean, he knew all the tricks, and he imparted them to your dad. I played golf with your dad a bunch of times where just when you thought he was done, he wasn't. Yeah.
he was reeling you in.
Yeah.
He was setting you up.
So about 10 years ago, Jack was a longtime director of the PNC Bank. About 10 years ago, PNC and Western Southern went together and funded a park on Eastern Avenue next to the a boys club down there, LeBlanc Boys Club. And it's a wheelchair-friendly park, sort of in honor of Maurice Stokes. And so if you go down there, you will sometimes, weekdays, see guys playing basketball in wheelchairs and stuff. It's kind of cool. And the sign up there says the Jack Twyman Park, presented by PNC and Western Southern.
Well, I can't, just to your point, I mean, being the son and daughter of Jack Twyman, I mean, a lot of this stuff you take for granted. You don't really know what the outside thinks of what he does, and to you, it's, he's your hero, obviously, but you don't really know how extraordinary things were. And I have to relay a story that just reminded me of your story, in that when Dad passed away, I came in and everybody was running around, and I started, people were calling. And one time, picked up the phone, Mom was out, picked up the phone, and there was a guy, hello, is Carol there? I said, no, this is Jay. Can I help? He goes, Jay. He goes, this is Bob Pettit. I just want to tell you, and please let Carol know, I really wanted to let you know that when I watch the NBA today, and I see these guys hugging and kissing at half court, I think it's BS. He goes, there's only one guy that I would hug before a game, and it's your dad for what he did for Maurice Stokes. So tell your mom I love her, and God bless. And he hung up. And it was a great story. But to your point.
Ken, we're talking about the importance of coaches and role models and mentors, and you got to tell us a little bit about Eddie Biles. You had the privilege of playing for one of the most famous coaches in the Cincinnati region. Eddie Biles going to coach the Houston Oilers later, but particularly about the XU-UC game.
Well, I got to remember this is not, I can't give you the X-rated story. But anyway, we played the University of Cincinnati, and before the game, we would go to the statue of the Virgin Mother on Xavier's campus, and Ed Biles would give us a pep talk, and he would cry, and he would say, you know, they have carpet on their locker room floors. We don't. You know, they're spoiled. Our parents are hardworking, blue-collar folks. They're elitists. I was out of college 2 years before I realized that Ed Biles was not Catholic. But I'll give you the story, and you can use your imaginations. We were playing UC, and the Bearcats were known as the fourth quarter team. They were bigger, faster than we were. And so Ed Biles decided that in the fourth quarter, we would, in fact, all stand on the sidelines, the unit that was not in the game, and we would wave across the field to the Bearcats like this. So sure enough, we were down by it was a tie game. Fourth quarter, we did this. Wound up winning 10-7. Warren Bennis and Father E.J. O'Connor were the presidents at that time. I was a captain. We met at the field. And sure enough, Warren Bennis told Father, he said, your boys played above themselves. It was a great game. He said, Father, what was this all about? Father said, well, Warren, you are a great theorist in organizational motivation, which he was. And Bennis acknowledged, yes. He said, well, simply put, this is four of these.
And Jay, what was your dad's reaction when the Boston College UC game, when you had the honor of winning the game for Boston University?
So you got my message to ask that question. No, I'm just kidding. But I played at Boston University, not Beast.
I'm sorry, Boston
Boston University. But I don't. Myron Hughes is here. I don't really want to dwell upon it. You know, we got lucky and we beat them, and I hit a last-second shot. Thank goodness. But it was a tough, hard-fought game. It was before the shot clock was taking place. So I think it was like 37-35 because we were stalling the ball. They were much bigger and faster, and we had a pretty good young coach in Rick Pitino. So he had a good game plan that we executed there. So, but yeah, his reaction was he filmed the game. It was broadcast back in Cincinnati, and so he filmed this game, and it was on a VH, 8-track thing. And I think about 15 years later, I was like looking for it, and it had been played so many times that it wore out because I think he liked to watch it so much, and he was so proud. So it was very good.
I'll tell you a funny one that his father laughed at. We played the Quantico Marines. I tackled a 240-pound fullback with my head instead of my shoulder, was knocked out. They sent me to the Good Samaritan Hospital to get head x-rays. Came back, the x-rays were fine. I went on and played the last of the fourth quarter. The next day, the Cincinnati Post gave me the most banner headline of my entire career. And this cracked your father and Oscar Robertson up. The headline read, Blackwell head x-ray show nothing.
Jack told me about his first encounter with Bobby Knight. He said he met Bobby Knight, and Bobby Knight said, I was at maybe high school. I drove down to Cincinnati Gardens. You had just gotten out of the service. You came in, and you scored 36 points and had like 13 rebounds. And Jack goes, no, I had 38 points and 15 rebounds. Who's this punk telling me this stuff? So 2 days later, a copy of the Cincinnati Enquirer showing that Bobby Knight was right ended up at my house. He said, we've been friends ever since. They had some great times together. Bobby Knight must have been something else. Most of the kids that played for Bobby Knight were coaches' sons.
Bobby Knight was great. When my dad passed away, Bobby Knight was another person that called. I mean, it was amazing just to be there and get these incoming phone calls. But you know, Bobby Knight calls up and also gives I'm really sorry, and he was wonderful. And he said something that was really special. He goes, I know your son Max is going through a process right now, and your dad was really involved, and I'm going to take over and make sure he gets exposure for trying to play college basketball. And I said, Bobby Knight is going to help out my son.
Go ahead, finish. I want to ask you a question about your father's last game. Did he score 30 points in his last game?
You probably know better than I do. He would have it tattooed somewhere on his arm. I mean, I'm reminded, you talked about in the hospital and like his energy when it was fantastic. We were so blessed as a family when it seemed like it was not going to really go the way we wanted it to, and he taught everybody how to face death, and he had the family around. He had the priest there, and he said, listen, I just don't want to go through this because I think it's going to be a tough road, and I don't think I'm going to survive. Is it bad if I just decide I want to put my faith in God's hands? I've lived a good life, and I'm excited to see what's on the other side. And the priest said, no, that's beautiful. You're teaching us how you're supposed to face death. And all of our family saw that, and all of our family experienced the happiness of that period then when he was relieved, knowing that he just wanted to enjoy the next 4 days or 3 days or whatever. And one thing he did, because he was tired and he was trying to get through and meet and make everybody feel special, one time he fell asleep, and he's sitting there and we're all looking at him, and he goes up, and I go, Dad, where were you? He goes, I just had 45 against the Celtics. I mean, it was fantastic. So he was.
He called me up one time. He's in hospice, telling me he's going to make the next board meeting, and I believed him. I mean, he was strong and everything else, and the family said he just went back down. But remember when he also did the ABC Sunday television NBA game, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so the question came up. Oscar was on the board of our mutual funds about how the big change happened in the NBA, where it became more colorful and whatnot. And Oscar said, in my day, if I'd have driven the lane the way Dr. J did or one of the other guys, I'd have gotten 4 elbows from the other team and 2 from my own.
Well, actually, Lisa and I had a great lunch with Oscar about 4 years ago.
We
And
did.
We had all this ambition of working on a project together, and life got in the way a little bit. But Oscar had some great stories. I said, Oscar, what was your first introduction to Jack Twyman? And he said, well, I came in here. I was a young player at University of Cincinnati. Went over to Wheelers, to play a pickup game, and I've had this guy Jack Twyman guard me, and man, he just fouled the heck out of me. I mean, I got bumps and bruises, and I got injured, and I was like, I'm not going to go play this game anymore. So yeah, he was very grabby.
There's another question when Dad was in the hospital, and my sister Michelle and my sister Julie are there, and they've lived in town, in Cincinnati, and it was getting near the end, and so they're a member of the St. Gertrude's Parish at the time. And what order of priest was that? The Dominicans. So so they called because they wanted Dad to make his last confession, and so this young guy, so earnest, dressed in this beautiful white robe, and he had the beads, and he goes up, and my dad was a very humble man, very humble, and he said, do you have any sins that you would like to confess right now? And he in all honesty, he said, I don't. And this poor priest was there. I mean, he must have been like 12, and he doesn't know what to do with this response. And it was, so I think, but yeah, he was very gracious and.
Well, one thing, I'm sorry to talk so much, but I just feel like I got to share these, get these out. But the one thing he said to all of the kids and everybody is that I'll be winking at you, so, be looking for a sign, right? And you guys can all attest. And his number was 27 for the majority of his career. 31 was for a couple years, but 27 was very special. You can see all his uniforms back there. And I know with our family, and everybody's got other stories with the other families, but with our family, it just is uncanny. Our one son goes to, University of Chicago. His dorm room is dorm room 127. Our son, our oldest son, gets married on July 27th. Those are, more coincidental, but 4 months after my dad passed away, my youngest goes back to school in 6th or 7th grade, and at school they issue you a lock and has a little combination, and gets his lock, he looks at the combination, he starts crying, and the teacher comes over to him, he goes, what are you crying about? He goes, oh my God, this is my grandpa. His number for his lock was 27031. And he just got chills. And so we have him, he's up there. 27 minutes on the GPS, Marion said that, yeah.
And your son got a 27 on his math test.
That's about what I got, I don't know. Anyway.
Ken, you had something else you were thinking of.
Oh, no, my view is that I don't know if it's urban legend or whatever, but my understanding is that in the last game, that your dad did score 30 points. And it was the one time that Oscar became more of the assist guy than the shooter. And so again, it just goes to show the sort of teamwork and camaraderie that even competitors felt when their mission became a common goal, a common aspiration or pursuit. And Myron probably knows better than I that relationship was special, and it came through, and it also with Russ and some of the other guys who played against him and with him, but who knew, again, his personal example fed their desire to do the right thing.
What was that? I mean, that people are so committed to playing in the Stokes benefit game. I mean, I think it said in the movie that there were like 90 players total in the league, and 60 players came to the first game, almost 2/3 of the players, so they couldn't let everybody play, so half the stands were players. But one player who was especially dedicated to play was Wilt Chamberlain, and when the first game came together, there was not a lot of social media or texting or whatnot, but word got to Wilt that there was a game being played at Kutcher's up on a certain date in August or whatever, it was preseason, but Wilt was touring Europe with the Harlem Globetrotters. So what Wilt did, he said, I can't miss this game. So Wilt, under his own dime, he left the Globetrotters for a night. He took a supersonic transport from Paris, landed at JFK, hired a helicopter. He landed on the softball field while the game had already just started, gets out of the thing, goes in, changes into the uniform, plays the rest of the game, dominates, signs a couple autographs, the helicopter's waiting, goes back in the helicopter, back to JFK, catches a flight back to Paris. I mean, he just would not miss to support his teammates. So to your story about camaraderie and what people, I don't know if that would happen today. I mean, and it was just an amazing thing that Maurice and again, it brought on a lot A lot
Yeah,
of great
and
things.
even after Maurice passed, the game continued.
Yeah.
And so I was living in New York with Sports Illustrated, and Dad was going to go up to the game at Kutcher, so I rented a car, went up there, and I mean, he was not a spring chicken at that point, but and all these other players were of his generation, and but they played and they loved it. And after Maurice passed, the proceeds from the game benefited other players who of Dad and Maurice's generation who didn't have the coverage they needed and the coverage that the players have now. So that was a really nice legacy about that game, that it did continue to help other players.
Yep.
Jack was a special guy, and I think everybody who got to know him well just couldn't appreciate him as much as he deserved. He was just wonderful, but a very solid friend with a great sense of humor, and he was supportive, loyal as hell. We miss him.
Yep.
We do too.
Yep. Well, Lisa and Jay and Michelle and Julie, thank you so much for sharing your dad with us, and the story of brotherly love, as good as humanity gets. And we're also happy to learn more about the story. Ken and John, thanks for your comments, and thanks to everybody so much for being here this evening. And the bar's still open.